Hey everyone, welcome back to the latest episode of Bitcoin Weekly for February 13th, 2024. Lots of stories today. Bitcoin at 50K. Bitcoin expected to get stronger before the halving. Of course, we still have the articles of saying with the spot ETFs and people buying Bitcoin, people are like, yeah, you guys got to be careful. You know, Bitcoin's quite volatile. I would say the negativity is less than what it is. And not to mention these stories and a whole lot more. But as usual, we have to get started with checking the Bitcoin chart. So let's dive straight into it. So Bitcoin currently at $49,892.82 as of the time of recording this episode. As you can see, roughly Bitcoin held to around $50,000 and has been going up and down. As of 10:25 a.m. Taiwanese time, it was still at $50,000 when I woke up this morning. And regret not recording this episode sooner. But no, $49,000, like $100 short of 50,000 is still fantastic. Multiple reasons for this current price point is people have shown the data, right, that as the smaller Bitcoin holders, I should say smaller as in people who have hundreds of Bitcoins, have been selling the ETFs we've been buying. I saw a thread today about someone saying, you know what, the current production of Bitcoin is not enough for what the spot Bitcoin ETFs want. We saw, I think, BlackRock with 3 billion in assets under management. ARKB crossed 1 billion in assets under management. Wonderful. This is what was expected. We had another sort of negative naysayer, 𝕂𝕂, who came out and say, actually, I was a bit bearish before when it comes to Bitcoin, but actually I've changed my expectation. I'm quite bullish now. What do you guys think? How's Bitcoin looking? I've seen wonderful price targets anywhere from 70 to 100 to 500,000 to $1 million for one Bitcoin, but I think $70,000 pre-halving seems just about right, because if you go back to the idea of at the moment people keep buying Bitcoin and this is what their supply is, and when the halving actually happens, the supply for Bitcoin will drop by half. People have to start buying Bitcoin from someone else, which will drive up demand, and with the lower supply, that could, again, emphasis on could, lead to price appreciation. Okay, with that being said, let's jump into today's first story. First story, of course, has to be Bitcoin extends its gains, breaking through the $50,000 level. This is really interesting this week. If you're one of those people who, I guess when I first started into digital assets or cryptocurrency, I used to check my phone all the time. I remember mining my first Ethereum and then selling that and getting into Binance at that point, and then starting off with my local exchange. And I'll be like checking my phone all the time. Now I rarely check it, but it's still, again, once you're working in digital assets and you have coworkers and friends like, oh my God, Bitcoin's at $49,000 and Bitcoin's at $48,000. And it seems like today is only Tuesday. And I remember seeing the message of people posting Bitcoin's at 49, Bitcoin's at 50. Again, going back to the first story where we've got lots of positive factors. We're probably about 2 months away from the halving. Again, check out the 21.co June Analytics dashboard, which mentions when approximately the halving is going to happen. And that's supposed to be a big impact on Bitcoin and the price and appreciation and supply and demand, of course. Check out some of our older stories. We talked about how mining is going to impact the halving, how some miners are mining in the negative, is what the way I term it, where they're losing money for every mined Bitcoin. But again, because they're expecting it to go up, not to mention the small retail miners who have running ASIC miners in their houses and stuff who are, depending on electricity costs and hardware costs, are probably also mining in the negative as well. As always, these stories are included down in the show notes. Please go and support Tanaya Michael and some of the other journalists who do this excellent reporting. And let's move on to today's second story. All right, today's second story is just about macro. What I've realized in doing Bitcoin Weekly is we have to include one macro story every single week, just because the macro has somewhat of an impact on Bitcoin and sentiment and what people think and believe when it comes to cryptocurrency as well. And while Bitcoin is not that much correlated to the S&P 500 of the stock market anymore, there is some correlation in the sense of when the stock market is impacted or when the economy is impacted, people are like, okay, I don't want to invest in certain kinds of assets anymore. But overall, the news is great. The stock market continues to go up. There are still some sort of warning signs there. There's still larger macroeconomic challenges of things going on with the Red Sea and shipping at the moment, which is bound to impact inflation at some point. But that being said, things are looking very rosy. Some of the stories I've been reading yesterday is people are expecting this economy to have that softer landing, something like an 89% surety along those lines. And with that softer landing, they're expecting the Fed to cut rates. And if you go back to last week's story where there was somewhere like a 20% prediction of there being a rate cut in March, I think that's going to go up. I didn't see any stories to that effect just yet, but this is just my impression. Again, not financial or legal advice. But yeah, it says right there at the top of the headlines, the S&P 500 closed above 5,000 for the first time ever on Friday. As three major averages logged a positive week for the 13th time in the past 14 weeks. That's 3 months. So that is a very long time. So if you're investing in the stock market, right, what do you think about the inflation in the US and then, correspondingly inflation wherever you live? Are you worried about it? I looked at a story today or yesterday about food inflation in the Eurozone, which has come down a little bit, something like 0.4% from 6.1 to 5.7% in the European Union. I don't know, I haven't spoken to a lot of people, but I still feel like prices and consumer spending are not where they should be, but I guess we'll have to see what happens. All right, let's move on to today's third story. All right, today's third story, very simple, continuing our sort of Bitcoin narrative or positive Bitcoin narrative. Spot Bitcoin ETFs have amassed more than 192,000 Bitcoin in holdings as of Friday since their launch nearly a month ago. Bitcoin can see a steady increase after its halving event on lower selling pressure and new interest in native Bitcoin applications. Ordinals have revitalized Bitcoin on-chain activity and bolstered fundamentals. Also, buying demand from spot Bitcoin exchange-traded funds, ETFs, which are likely to support higher prices in the future. Emphasis on the future. So ordinals are interesting. We talked about them last week. I would highly encourage you to check out my colleague 𝕋𝕚𝕖 ℂ𝕠𝕕𝕖𝕤's Research Analyst Call, where she talked about ordinals and their impact. Overall, NFTs and ordinals are not where they were a year ago or 2 years ago. They're still fairly popular. Binance launched its own ordinals marketplace. I'm sure there's probably a dedicated ordinals marketplace in other places as well. So ordinals are another reason. If you go back and definitely check out that Bitcoin dashboard that I mentioned earlier in today's show, that also tells you the impact of ordinals and inscriptions, right? And how ordinals are really important to miner fees, right? Because miners earn money from ordinals inscriptions. Lots of positive factors for Bitcoin. On top of the ETF, on top of other people building applications on top of Bitcoin, there's also the idea of DeFi or BitFi, right? Of finance applications building on top of Bitcoin as well. We have to see how all of this shakes out in the future. I don't think we haven't seen a super strong case beyond the Bitcoin is digital gold case at the moment, but people are very passionate about Bitcoin. We'll have to see what happens. All right, moving on to today's fourth story. All right, today's fourth story, of course, has to be some realistic story, something to remind everybody, because again, you have to be responsible as somebody who's putting out videos to remind everyone that yes, it's not financial legal advice, but also investing in cryptocurrency, investing in digital assets is risky. There are dangers. It's not 100% safe. It's not like buying or putting in a cash deposit or doing something safe like that, right? Because you never know what might happen. By Larry Light, senior contributor, this is from Forbes, I believe. Forget the hype. Avoid Bitcoin, even if it is easier to buy now, right? That's the big thing with the ETFs, right? Is you can buy ARKB and other ETFs on eToro, platforms like eToro, which make it super easy. You deposit some money into eToro, you click buy and buy, you're done, guaranteed. So what Larry argues is, this is wonderful, right? It is nice that it's easy. You don't have to deal with MetaMask or Phoenix Wallet if you're buying Bitcoin or whatever you're doing on crypto. Go to your broker or go to wherever you buy your shares or your equities and just say, I want to buy this, and you buy it and it's done. You don't have to worry about passwords or seed phrases, anything like that, which is amazing. At the same time though, right, a lot of people are FOMOing and fear of missing out because, oh my God, this looks amazing. It's gone up from $20-something thousand to $50,000. I want to go in, right? But some people forget the volatility that has happened with Bitcoin, despite it being the best performing asset over the last 10 years, something along those lines. Again, I'm not going to go through this entire article because that would bore me out of my mind and probably bore you out of your mind. So definitely read it. But basically, the author And Ricky Keller and Larry Light argue Bitcoin's wonderful, but you need to be careful. This is not for everybody because it is risky. And maybe think about it. Do your research, check about portfolio allocations. You'll see lots of stuff on Reddit about, oh, yes, get all in Bitcoin, 100%. That's it right now. Don't do that. It is risky. You don't want to lose all your money. Diversify. That's the wonderful thing about digital assets, is that the biggest push I can see from everybody on social media and responsible people is that digital assets, cryptocurrency should be some percentage of your portfolio, some percentage of equity, some percentage of individual stocks, some percentage of fixed assets like gold, things like that, and then digital assets. Let me know what you think. Are you worried about Bitcoin? Are you very positive about it? I'd imagine if you're probably watching this, you're probably positive about it. What about people in your life? How do they think about Bitcoin? What do they perceive it as? And then let's go back to the main video. Guys, thank you very much, as always, for tuning into this episode. Next week, you will see our February's podcast where we interview the CEO of Loans, who was previously at Hedera, was also quite involved in the digital asset space, cryptocurrency space and development, and he has some awesome stories. I highly recommend you check out that interview. And yeah, so that interview was pre-recorded again because I will be in South Africa next week. My coworker Lorena is taking over and posting things and also recording some videos. So stay tuned. She had a wonderful idea that we're going to work on for the 21 Shares channel. So please do check that out in the future. And yeah, that is it for today. As usual, episodes out through Sunday. I'm going to try and schedule them as best as possible. And then Fluent's interview next week. And then when I'll be back on Tuesday, on Wednesday, I'll record Bitcoin Weekly. And then we'll be back to normal as usual. Though this year, I'm going to aim to take at least 2 weeks of break. So last year we did a 1 week, right, where I had recorded content. So this year we'll aim for 2 weeks, and I'll just have to figure out how to do that. Thanks as always for supporting us, for supporting the show, for tuning in, for watching these shorts. Don't forget, our shorts are available on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Check those out there if you're on those platforms, if you're on a certain age like I am. And yeah, that's it. And then we will talk to you guys in about 2 weeks. Bye.